My name is Kethvar, and I serve as a cultural liaison aboard the interstellar research vessel Harmony's Edge. For the past 3 cycles, I have worked alongside beings from 12 different species, studying the mysteries of deep space. We are explorers, scientists, diplomats. We pride ourselves on being civilized, rational creatures who have moved beyond the primitive instincts of our ancestors. That was before I met the humans. The day they arrived changed everything I thought I knew about fear, about survival, and about what it truly means to be alive in this vast, dangerous universe. I remember the exact moment Captain Fexare announced their arrival. The bridge fell silent as she read the transmission aloud. A human exploration ship, the Defiant Dawn, had responded to our distress beacon. They were offering assistance. Humans, whispered Dr. Zefti, my colleague from the Altarian Republic. Her feathered crest flattened against her skull, a sign of deep unease. I've heard stories. We all had. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, barely 200 years since first contact. They came from a world so hostile that most species couldn't survive there for more than a few hours without environmental suits. Their planet, Earth, was a death trap of extreme weather, predators, diseases, and natural disasters that would terrify most civilized beings. But it wasn't just their world that made them legendary. It was what that world had made them into. The stories spoke of humans who never surrendered, who fought against impossible odds, who would rather die than submit. They were said to be unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous in ways that our careful, logical minds struggled to comprehend. Some called them heroes. Others called them monsters. Most agreed they were both. As I waited in the docking bay for their arrival, I tried to calm my nerves. I had studied dozens of species, learned their customs, their fears, their hopes. I was good at understanding others, at finding common ground. Surely humans couldn't be so different. I was wrong. The airlock cycled, and they stepped aboard our ship. 3 of them. 2 males and 1 female, if I understood their biology correctly. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect body control, their eyes constantly scanning, cataloging, assessing. Even in what appeared to be a peaceful first contact situation, they were ready for violence. The leader introduced herself as Commander Sarah Chen. She was smaller than I expected, barely reaching my shoulder, but something about her presence filled the room. When she looked at me, I felt exposed, as if she could see right through all my careful diplomatic training to the trembling creature beneath. Commander, I managed, offering the standard greeting gesture. I am Kethvar, cultural liaison. We are grateful for your assistance. She smiled, and I nearly stepped backward. Human smiles were supposed to be friendly, according to our files. But there was something predatory about the way her lips curved, revealing teeth that seemed far too sharp for a supposedly omnivorous species. Happy to help, she said. Her voice was warm, but underneath it, I heard something else. Steel. Control. The voice of someone who had seen terrible things and survived them. Captain Fexare briefed them on our situation. We had been exploring the Kepler Void, a region of space known for its unusual gravitational anomalies, when our engines failed. Worse, our sensors had detected movement in the asteroid field around us. Large movement. Something was out there in the darkness, and it wasn't natural. How large? Asked one of the other humans, a man called Rodriguez. He had scars on his hands and arms, old marks that spoke of violence survived. Unknown, Captain Fexare admitted. Our sensors are damaged. But the mass readings suggest something enormous. Possibly ship-sized, but the electromagnetic signature is organic. The humans exchanged glances. In that moment of silent communication, I saw something that chilled me. They weren't afraid. If anything, they seemed almost eager. We'll need to see your sensor logs, Commander Chen said. And I'll want to examine your defensive capabilities. Defensive capabilities? Dr. Zefti looked confused. We're a research vessel. We carry no weapons. The third human, a woman named Torres, made a sound that might have been laughter. It wasn't a pleasant sound. No weapons, she repeated, shaking her head. In unexplored space. With unknown hostiles nearby. She looked at her companions. These people really don't understand, do they? Understand what? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Commander Chen's expression grew serious. The universe isn't a safe place. It never has been, and it never will be. Out here, in the deep dark, there are things that will kill you just because they can. Things that see your ships, your people, your entire civilization as nothing more than food. But, we're explorers, protested Dr. ZFTI. Scientists. We come in peace. Peace is a luxury, Rodriguez said quietly. Something you can only afford when you're strong enough to defend it. They spent the next few hours examining our ship, studying our sensor readings, asking questions that made me increasingly uncomfortable. They wanted to know about our emergency protocols, our evacuation procedures, our survival equipment. They seemed particularly interested in our escape pods. These won't work, Torres announced after examining one of them. Not if you're being hunted. They're too slow, too visible. Whatever's out there will pick them off one by one. Hunted? Captain Thexaray's mandibles clicked nervously. You think we're being hunted? Something that big doesn't just drift randomly through space, Commander Chen explained. It's moving with purpose, staying just outside your sensor range. It's watching you, learning your patterns. That's predator behavior. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as crew members rushed to their stations. In the command center, the main display showed something that made my blood freeze. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of our ship, and it was moving toward us with terrifying speed. The shape was wrong, organic and twisted, covered in what looked like scales or armor plating. Appendages writhed around its bulk like tentacles, each one larger than our entire vessel. What is that thing? Someone whispered. Leviathan, said Rodriguez grimly. Deep space predator. They hunt in the void between stars, feeding on metal and energy. And, they're very, very smart. The creature was closing fast, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. Our ship's engines were still offline, leaving us helpless as it approached. All hands, prepare for evacuation, Captain Thexaray announced over the comm system. No. Commander Chen's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Evacuation pods will just make you easier targets. It'll pick you off one by one while you're floating helpless in space. Then, what do you suggest? Captain Thexaray demanded. The three humans looked at each other again, and I saw that silent communication pass between them once more. When they turned back to us, their expressions had changed. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by something harder, more primal. We fight, Commander Chen said simply. Fight? Dr. ZFTI's crest was now completely flat against her skull. With what? You said yourself we have no weapons. Torres smiled, and this time I definitely took a step backward. Commander, did we bring the emergency kit? Always do, Rodriguez replied, his own smile just as terrifying. They moved with sudden, purposeful efficiency, heading back toward their ship. Within minutes, they had returned carrying cases that they quickly opened in our cargo bay. The contents made several crew members cry out in alarm. Weapons. Lots of them. Not the elegant energy projectors favored by most civilized species, but brutal, mechanical devices designed for one purpose, killing. Plasma rifles, Commander Chen explained, beginning to distribute them to her team. Magnetic accelerators. High explosive charges. And, these, she held up a small device that looked deceptively simple, are quantum disruptors. They tear apart molecular bonds at the subatomic level. You carry these things with you? I asked, horrified. Always, she replied matter-of-factly. Like I said, the universe isn't safe. You either prepare for the worst, or you become someone else's meal. The Leviathan was almost upon us now, its tentacles reaching out toward our hull. The ship shuddered as something scraped along our outer plating, testing, probing. It's looking for weak points, Torres observed, checking her weapon. Standard hunting behavior. They like to breach the hull gradually, let the atmosphere leak out while they feed on the ship's power systems. A terrible grinding sound echoed through the corridors as one of the creature's appendages found our main airlock and began forcing it open. Breach in Section 7, came the report from engineering. Emergency bulkheads are holding, but not for long. Commander Chen activated her comm unit. All non-essential personnel to the center of the ship. Stay away from the outer corridors. If you see anything that doesn't belong here, run. Don't try to fight it. What about you? Captain Thexare asked. We're going hunting, Rodriguez said, chambering around in his weapon. The sound was ominous, mechanical, final. They moved out into the corridors with a confidence that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Here we were, trapped in a crippled ship with a monster trying to break in, and these humans acted like they were going for a walk in the park. I followed them, though every instinct screamed at me to hide. As a cultural liaison, I told myself it was my duty to observe and document. The truth was, I couldn't help myself. I had to see what these creatures would do. The first breach came near the cargo bay. The hull simply peeled away like the skin of a fruit, and something pushed through the opening. It was part of the Leviathan, a probing appendage covered in sensors and what looked like feeding tubes. It moved like a blind snake, tasting the air, searching for life signs. The humans didn't hesitate. They opened fire with their primitive weapons, and the corridor filled with light and noise and the smell of ozone. The appendage recoiled, wounded but not destroyed, leaving behind a trail of something that might have been blood. It'll be back, Torres said, reloading with practiced efficiency. And it'll bring friends. She was right. More breaches opened throughout the ship, each one allowing another piece of the monster inside. The Leviathan was dissecting our vessel systematically, piece by piece. But the humans were ready for it. They moved through the ship like ghosts, appearing wherever the creature tried to gain entry, driving it back with controlled bursts of violence. They used the ship's layout to their advantage, turning corridors into kill zones, using maintenance shafts as hidden routes to flank their enemy. I watched Rodriguez corner a feeding tendril in the engineering section and destroy it with some kind of explosive device. I saw Torres use the ship's own systems against the creature, channeling power through damaged conduits to electrocute a probing appendage. And Commander Chen moved through it all like a conductor directing a deadly orchestra, coordinating their efforts with calm precision. But what truly terrified me wasn't their skill with weapons or their tactical knowledge. It was how they approached the fight. Most species, when faced with a superior predator, would flee or hide or seek to bargain for their lives. These humans seemed to regard the battle as just another problem to solve, another challenge to overcome. They weren't afraid. They should have been terrified, facing a creature that could swallow our entire ship without effort. Instead, they were calm, focused, almost pleased to have something to fight against. Second breach in medical, came the report over the comm. On it, Torres replied, jogging toward the medical bay with her weapon ready. A few minutes later, the sounds of combat echoed through the corridors, followed by an inhuman shriek of pain from the Leviathan. Then, silence. Medical bay is secure, Torres reported. But this thing is getting smarter. It's coordinating its attacks now. She was right. The random probing had stopped, replaced by synchronized assaults on multiple sections of the ship. The creature was learning our defenses, adapting its tactics. It's testing us, Commander Chen observed. Seeing how we respond. Time for a new strategy. What did you have in mind? Rodriguez asked. Her smile was absolutely terrifying. We stopped playing defense. Torres, how much of that quantum disruptor charge do we have left? Enough for one really big boom, Torres replied. Good. We're going hunting. They sealed their environmental suits and prepared to venture outside the ship, directly onto the Leviathan's surface. The plan was insane. The creature was massive, powerful, and in its natural environment. Going outside would mean abandoning the relative safety of the ship to face it in open space. Most rational beings would never consider such a course of action. But humans, I was learning, were not rational beings. They were something far more dangerous. As I watched them prepare for what could only be described as a suicide mission, I finally understood why the stories about humans were told in whispers. Why other species spoke of them with a mixture of awe and terror. Standing next to these three humans as they calmly planned to attack a creature that outmassed them 1,000-fold, I felt true fear for the first time in my life. Not fear of the monster outside our hull, but fear of the monsters I was standing beside. And the most terrifying thing of all was that they were on our side. The battle was far from over, and I was beginning to realize that the Leviathan had made a terrible mistake when it decided to hunt this particular ship. It had found prey, yes, but not the kind it expected. It had found humans. And humans, I was learning, were never just prey. The humans moved through the airlock like they were born for the vacuum of space. Their suits were different from ours, bulkier but somehow more aggressive looking, covered in attachments and modifications that spoke of constant use in hostile environments. As they sealed the outer door behind them, I watched through the porthole with a mixture of fascination and horror. Commander Chen led the way, magnetic boots clicking against the ship's hull as she navigated toward the nearest breach point. The Leviathan's appendages had wrapped around our vessel like the tentacles of some primordial sea creature, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Magnificent," Dr. ZFTI whispered beside me. Despite her obvious fear, the scientist in her was mesmerized by the creature. "Look at the neural complexity in those patterns. It's not just hunting, it's thinking." She was right. The light patterns shifted and changed, forming complex sequences that resembled nothing so much as a vast alien language. The creature was massive beyond comprehension, its bulk stretching out into the darkness of space like a living mountain. Parts of it were still hidden in shadow, but what we could see was covered in scales that shifted color with each pulse of light. "Contact," came Rodriguez's voice over the calm. "I found what looks like a primary neural cluster. Deploying sensor probe." Through the external cameras, we watched as he attached a small device to one of the creature's appendages. Immediately, data began flowing back to our computers, and what we saw made everyone in the command center fall silent. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Vexnan, our xenobiologist. "These readings suggest a distributed nervous system spanning the entire organism. It's not just intelligent, it's a superorganism. Every part of it is thinking, processing, learning." The implications were staggering. We weren't just facing a predator, we were facing something that might be more intelligent than any of us. A living computer the size of a small moon, with millions of years of evolution behind it. "Copy that," Commander Chen's voice came through the calm, completely unperturbed by this revelation. "Torres, how's that charge coming along?" "Almost ready," Torres replied. She had found what appeared to be a major nerve junction, a place where dozens of the creature's neural pathways converged. This should really ruin its day. I couldn't understand their calmness. They had just learned that they were facing something that could potentially outthink them at every turn, and they were still proceeding with their plan to attack it directly. It was either incredible bravery or absolute insanity. Perhaps with humans, there was no difference. The Leviathan suddenly shifted, its massive bulk rotating slowly around our ship. Several crew members cried out in alarm as the artificial gravity fluctuated, but the humans outside continued their work with steady precision. "It knows we're here," Commander Chen observed. "It's trying to shake us loose." The creature's movement became more violent, rolling and twisting in a way that would have thrown any normal being into space. But the humans held on, their magnetic boots and safety lines keeping them attached to its surface even as the universe spun around them. "Neural activity is spiking," Dr. Vexnan reported. It's angry. I've never seen electromagnetic readings like this from a biological organism." The light patterns across the Leviathan's surface changed, becoming more rapid, more intense. The bioluminescent displays now pulsed in angry reds and yellows, creating a hypnotic pattern that made several crew members look away in discomfort. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. ZFTI realized suddenly. "Those patterns, they're not random. It's attempting to establish contact." Captain Fexare activated the external speakers. Unknown entity, this is Captain Fexare of the research vessel Harmony's Edge. We mean you no harm. Please respond. The light patterns shifted, becoming more complex, more urgent. Whatever the creature was trying to say, it was clearly frustrated by our inability to understand. Commander Chen, Captain Fexare called over the comm stand down. It may be trying to communicate. Negative, came the immediate reply. Torres, detonate on my mark. You can't. Dr. Zefti protested. This could be a first contact situation with a species more advanced than any we've ever encountered. It's a predator, Commander Chen's voice was flat, emotionless. I don't care how smart it is. It attacked us first. The argument might have continued, but the creature made the decision for us. Without warning, one of its massive appendages smashed into the side of our ship, sending shock waves through the hull. Emergency alarms screamed as several sections lost pressure, and crew members scrambled to reach emergency stations. It's not trying to communicate, Rodriguez's voice came through the static. It's trying to disorient us. Classic predator behavior. Make the prey confused and panicked before moving in for the kill. Another impact, harder this time. The lights flickered throughout the ship, and I could hear the groaning of stressed metal. Whatever material the creature's appendages were made of, they were strong enough to dent our reinforced hull. Hull breaches in sections 12 through 15, came the report from engineering. We're losing atmosphere fast. Through the porthole, I could see one of the creature's feeding appendages probing the new breaches, tasting the escaping air. The bioluminescent patterns shifted again, and this time there was something unmistakably satisfied about them. It's savoring us, I realized with growing horror. It's not just hungry, it's enjoying the hunt. Commander Chen's voice cut through our panic like a blade. Torres, now would be good. Detonating in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was visible even through the creature's thick hide, a brilliant flash of white light that erupted from deep within its neural cluster. The Leviathan's entire body convulsed, its massive form writhing in what could only be agony. The bioluminescent patterns went chaotic, flashing in random sequences as the creature's nervous system struggled to cope with the damage. But it wasn't dead. If anything, the attack seemed to have enraged it. The creature's movements became more violent, more purposeful. Appendages that had been probing and testing now struck with deliberate force, trying to crush our ship like an insect. The humans outside were thrown around like dolls, saved only by their safety lines and magnetic equipment. It's changing tactics, Torres reported, her voice strained as she fought to maintain her grip. The attack damaged its higher cognitive functions, but its primal responses are still intact. Meaning? Captain Fexare demanded. Meaning it stopped thinking and started reacting, Rodriguez explained. It's going to try to destroy us quickly before we can hurt it again. The creature's assault on our ship intensified. Multiple appendages struck simultaneously, and I could hear the hull beginning to buckle under the strain. We were running out of time. All hands, abandon ship, Captain Fexare announced. Proceed to escape pods immediately. Negative, Commander Chen's voice was sharp. I told you, the pods won't work. It'll hunt them down one by one. Then, what do you suggest? Captain Fexare's voice was beginning to crack under the stress. We kill it, Chen replied matter-of-factly. The simplicity of the statement was breathtaking. Here we were, facing a creature of unimaginable size and intelligence, and the human's solution was simply to kill it. Not outsmart it, not bargain with it, not flee from it. Kill it. The quantum disruptor barely scratched it, Dr. Vexnan pointed out. What makes you think we can actually destroy something this large? Because, Torres said, her voice carrying a note of dark satisfaction, we're not aiming for the body. We're aiming for the brain. Through the external cameras, I watched as the three humans began moving across the creature's surface with new purpose. They were no longer trying to damage random sections, they were following the neural pathways, tracing the bioluminescent patterns back to their source. The light patterns, Rodriguez explained as he worked. They're not just communication or hunting displays. They're showing us the creature's neural network in real time. Every pulse, every flash, is a nerve impulse traveling through its body. And if we follow them back to the source, Torres continued, we find the brain, Commander Chen finished. Or brains. Something this size probably has multiple cognitive centers. The logic was sound, but the execution was terrifying. They were essentially performing brain surgery on a living mountain while it tried to kill them, using nothing but weapons and crude sensors. The creature seemed to realize what they were doing. Its movements became more frantic, and new types of appendages emerged from previously hidden sections of its body. These were different from the feeding tentacles, smaller but covered in what looked like defensive spines and toxin sacs. Defense mechanisms, Dr. Vexnan observed. It's evolved specific countermeasures against this type of attack. One of the defensive appendages struck at Rodriguez, missing him by inches. Or it hit the creature's own surface, the organic material began to dissolve, eaten away by some powerful acid. Biological warfare, Torres commented, dodging another strike. This thing really doesn't want to die. None of them do, Rodriguez replied, setting another charge. That's what makes them dangerous. I watched in horrified fascination as the humans continued their work. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic, anticipating each other's actions, covering each other's movements. When one was threatened, the others would immediately move to support them. When one found a target, the others would adjust their own positions to maximize the effectiveness of the attack. It was like watching a single organism with 3 bodies, each part perfectly synchronized with the others. They weren't just humans working together, they were something more, something evolved for cooperation in the face of mortal danger. Another charge detonated, this one deeper within the creature's neural network. The Leviathan's response was immediate and violent. Its entire body spasmed, and several of its appendages struck our ship simultaneously. The impact was so severe that the artificial gravity failed completely, leaving us floating in 0G as emergency lights flashed throughout the corridors. Direct hit on a major neural cluster, Torres reported. But there are more. This thing has redundant brain centers throughout its body. How many more? Commander Chen asked. Sensors indicate at least 6 major cognitive centers, plus dozens of smaller processing nodes. It's like fighting a creature that has backup brains for its backup brains. The situation was hopeless. Even if they could destroy 1 or 2 of the creature's neural centers, there would be others to take over their functions. The Leviathan was simply too well designed, too perfectly adapted for survival. Any rational being would have given up at this point. Would have accepted defeat and tried to negotiate for a quick death. But humans weren't rational beings. Rodriguez, Commander Chen's voice carried a note I hadn't heard before. Something cold and determined that made my skin crawl. Remember that nest of void hunters we cleared out of the Centauri shipping lanes? Yeah, Rodriguez replied. Chain reaction. Take out the queen, and the neural link feedback destroys the entire hive. Think this thing might work the same way? There was a pause as Rodriguez considered the question. Maybe. If we can find the primary cognitive center, the one that coordinates all the others, and hit it hard enough, the neural cascade could shut down the entire organism, Torres finished. But we'd need to identify which brain is the primary control center. And we'd need a much bigger explosion. Leave that to me, Commander Chen said. Something in her tone made me very glad she was on our side. They regrouped near what appeared to be the largest of the creature's neural clusters, a massive concentration of bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with obvious importance. The light display here was so intense it was painful to look at directly, even through the filtered cameras. This is it, Rodriguez confirmed. Primary cognitive center. All the other neural networks are taking their cues from this one. How big an explosion are we talking about? Torres asked. Big, Commander Chen replied. She was working on some kind of device I didn't recognize, connecting components from their equipment packs. Really big. big enough to take out a significant portion of the creature's neural network in one shot. And, us along with it, Rodriguez pointed out matter-of-factly. Probably, Chen agreed. Unless we can get clear in time. They worked in silence for several minutes, assembling what could only be described as an improvised weapon of mass destruction. The device they created was crude but obviously powerful, incorporating elements from multiple quantum disruptors along with what appeared to be their ship's emergency fusion charges. Fascinating, Dr. Zefti whispered. They're building a neurological weapon. Something designed specifically to disrupt complex neural networks. The creature seemed to sense the danger. Its defensive responses became more desperate, and several new types of appendages emerged from its bulk. These were clearly weapons, organic cannons that fired some kind of plasma discharge. It's scared, Torres observed as she dodged another blast. I've never seen a creature this size show fear responses before. Fear makes them dangerous, Rodriguez warned. Desperate creatures do unpredictable things. As if to prove his point, the Leviathan suddenly did something completely unexpected. Instead of continuing to attack our ship, it began to retreat, backing away from us while maintaining its grip on our hull. It's trying to drag us with it, Captain Thexra realized. Into deep space, away from any chance of rescue. Smart, Commander Chin admitted. But, not smart enough. The device was ready. A ugly, improvised thing that hummed with barely contained energy. As Commander Chen activated it, I could see readings on our instruments that made no sense, energy outputs that should have been impossible from such a small device. What kind of weapon is that? I asked. The kind we're really hoping never to use again, Torres replied grimly. They placed the device directly on the creature's primary neural cluster and began their retreat. But the Leviathan wasn't going to make it easy for them. As if sensing its approaching doom, the creature's attacks became suicidal in their intensity. Appendages struck at the humans with no regard for the damage they might cause to the creature itself. Acid secretions burned through the creature's own hide in an attempt to reach the retreating figures. The bioluminescent patterns became so chaotic and bright that several of our crew members had to be treated for sensory overload. Detonation in 60 seconds, Commander Chen announced. We're not going to make it, Rodriguez observed with disturbing calm. It's not going to let us get clear. Yes, we are, Torres replied. Because we're not the only ones trying to survive here. She was right. Our ship's crew had not been idle during the battle. While the humans fought on the creature's surface, our engineers had been working frantically to restore power to the engines. As the countdown continued, our ship suddenly lurched forward, breaking free of several of the creature's appendages. Engines are back online, came the report from engineering. Limited power, but we can maneuver. Get us clear, Captain Thexra ordered. Maximum distance. Our ship pulled away from the Leviathan just as the humans reached the airlock. They moved with desperate efficiency, their magnetic boots clicking against our hull as they fought to reach safety before their weapon detonated. 10 seconds, Torres announced. They made it inside with 3 seconds to spare. The explosion was unlike anything I had ever seen. It started as a brilliant point of light at the center of the creature's primary neural cluster, then expanded outward in waves of disruption that traveled through the Leviathan's nervous system like wildfire. The creature's scream was audible even through the vacuum of space, a sound transmitted through electromagnetic frequencies that our radio equipment picked up and converted to audio. It was a sound of pure agony, of a vast intelligence suddenly cut away from itself, reduced to chaos and confusion. The bioluminescent patterns went wild, flashing in random sequences as the creature's neural network collapsed. Appendages spasmed and went limp. The massive body, no longer coordinated by a functioning brain, began to drift apart under its own momentum. Within minutes, the Leviathan was dead, its corpse beginning the slow process of decomposition that would eventually spread its nutrients across light years of space. Target neutralized, Commander Chen reported, removing her helmet. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had just completed a particularly challenging job. The rest of us stared at her in shock. In the span of a few hours, these three humans had analyzed, outmaneuvered, and destroyed a creature that by all rights should have been far beyond our ability to defeat. How? Dr. Vexnan asked. How did you know that would work? Commander Chin shrugged. Experience. When you fought as many different kinds of predators as we have, you start to recognize patterns. Neural networks, no matter how complex, all have weak points. You just have to find them. And, if you'd been wrong? Captain Fexare asked. Then, we'd all be dead, Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. But, we weren't wrong. We're still here. The simple confidence in that statement was terrifying. They had bet all our lives on their ability to understand and defeat a creature they had never encountered before, and they had won that bet through nothing more than experience, instinct, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. As I watched them clean and store their weapons with practiced efficiency, I realized that I was seeing something that most civilized beings never encountered: apex predators in their natural element. Humans weren't just another species that had achieved spaceflight. They were evolution's answer to a universe full of things that wanted to kill them. And they were very, very good at their job. The story was far from over. In the days that followed, I would learn more about what humans were truly capable of, about the depths of their determination and the heights of their courage. But, in that moment, floating in the debris field of a dead monster, I finally understood why the galaxy spoke of humans in whispers. They were the thing that even monsters feared. The silence that followed the Leviathan's death was deafening. Our ship drifted through the debris field, engines barely functioning, while the crew struggled to process what had just happened. Around us floated the remains of a creature that had been older than our civilization, reduced to lifeless chunks of organic matter by three humans with improvised weapons. I found myself staring at Commander Chen as she calmly filed her mission report. She wrote with the same matter-of-fact precision she had shown during combat, documenting the encounter as if it had been routine maintenance rather than a fight for survival against impossible odds. Hostile entity neutralized at 0347 ship time, she dictated to her recording device. Recommend updating navigation warnings for this sector. Large predators confirmed present in Kepler Void region. That was it. No mention of the creature's obvious intelligence, its complex neural network, or the fact that it might have been trying to communicate. To her, it had been simply another problem that required a violent solution. Dr. ZFTI approached cautiously, her feathered crest still flattened with residual fear. Commander, I need to ask you something. Chen looked up from her report, waiting. That creature, Dr. ZFTI continued, it was clearly intelligent. Possibly more intelligent than any of us. Don't you feel any remorse about destroying it? The question seemed to genuinely puzzle Chen. She considered it for a moment before responding. It tried to kill us, she said simply. Everything else is irrelevant. But, the knowledge we could have gained, Dr. ZFTI pressed. The things it might have taught us about deep space, about evolution, about intelligence itself. All of that is lost now. So is our lives, Rodriguez interjected. He had been listening to the conversation while cleaning his weapon. And the lives of everyone on this ship. That creature wasn't interested in sharing knowledge. It was interested in feeding. You don't know that, Dr. Vexnan said, joining the discussion. The communication attempts, the complex neural patterns, the obvious intelligence, all of that suggests a being capable of rational thought. Torres looked up from her own equipment maintenance. Capable of rational thought, yes. But, not rational morality. Intelligence doesn't make something good. Some of the worst monsters we've ever fought have been the smart ones. Monsters, Dr. ZFTI repeated. You called it a monster. What else would you call it? Chen asked. Something that hunts and kills other sapient beings for food? In any civilized definition, that's exactly what it was. I found myself studying the humans more intently as the debate continued. There was something in their attitudes that didn't quite fit with my understanding of civilized behavior. They spoke about violence and death with a casualness that made me uncomfortable, as if such things were normal parts of their daily existence. Tell me something, I said, interrupting the discussion. How many times have you done this before? Fought creatures like that Leviathan? The three humans exchanged glances, and I saw that silent communication pass between them again. Directly like that? Maybe a dozen times, Chen replied. But, if you're asking about hostile encounters in general. She paused, considering. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. It's hard to keep count after a while. Thousands, I repeated, hardly believing it. The universe is a dangerous place, Rodriguez said, echoing Chen's earlier words. Earth taught us that early. Our homeworld tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Everything from the weather to the wildlife to the geology was constantly attempting to eliminate our species. And, now that we're in space, Torres added, we've found that the rest of the universe is just as hostile. Maybe more so. Dr. Zefti's crest lifted slightly. But, surely most species can coexist peacefully. We've built an entire galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual understanding. You've built a civilization inside a protective bubble, Shin corrected. Safe shipping lanes, monitored systems, diplomatic protocols. But, step outside that bubble, into the real universe, and you'll find it's still the same kill or be killed environment it's always been. The same environment that created humans, I said, beginning to understand. Exactly, Rodriguez nodded. We're not peaceful by nature. We can't afford to be. Peace is something we have to fight for, again and again, because there's always something out there trying to take it away from us. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from our bridge. Captain Thexare's voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. All senior staff to the command deck immediately. We have a problem. We hurried to the bridge, where Captain Thexare stood before the main display screen with an expression of growing dread. The screen showed long-range sensor readings from the debris field around us. We're not alone, she announced grimly. Sensors are detecting multiple large contacts approaching from the edge of the system. At least 6, possibly more. The display updated to show the incoming signatures, and my blood ran cold. They were similar to the Leviathan we had just destroyed, but smaller and moving in what appeared to be a coordinated formation. Family group, Torres observed clinically. Or pack hunters. Either way, they're coming to investigate what happened to their friend. Can we escape? Captain Thexare asked. Engines are still damaged, came the report from engineering. We might achieve 1/4 impulse power, but not enough to outrun those things. The situation was hopeless. We had barely survived one encounter with a creature like these, and now we faced 6 of them with a crippled ship and depleted resources. But the humans didn't seem concerned. If anything, they appeared to be calculating, planning. What's our defensive capability? Chen asked. Minimal, Captain Thexare replied. We have basic shields, but they won't stop creatures of that size. And you used most of your weapons destroying the first one. Not all of them, Rodriguez said quietly. We still have the ship killer. The other 2 humans turned to look at him, and I saw something pass between them that made me deeply uneasy. The ship killer? I asked. Emergency weapon, Torres explained. Something we carry for situations where conventional methods won't work. What kind of weapon? Dr. Vexnan demanded. Chen hesitated before answering. Antimatter charges. Enough to destroy a small moon, if properly deployed. The bridge fell silent. Antimatter weapons were banned by every civilized government in the galaxy. The destructive potential was simply too great, the consequences too unpredictable. You carry antimatter weapons? Captain Thexare's voice was barely a whisper. Standard equipment for deep space exploration, Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. You never know what you might encounter out there. But, the regulations, Dr. Zefti protested. The treaties. Antimatter weapons are forbidden. Galactic law doesn't reach this far, Torres pointed out. Out here, the only law is survival. The approaching contacts were getting closer. On the screen, we could see them clearly now, 6 massive forms moving through space with the fluid grace of apex predators. They were smaller than the Leviathan we had fought, but still enormous by any reasonable standard. 20 minutes until they reach us, the navigator reported. Can you use the antimatter charges to destroy them? Captain Fexare asked desperately. Maybe 1 or 2, Chen replied. But not all of them. And using antimatter in an asteroid field would create a cascade reaction. Everything in this system would be destroyed, including us. Then, what do you suggest? The humans conferred quietly among themselves, speaking in rapid, technical language that I couldn't follow. When they turned back to us, their expressions were grim. We evacuate, Chen announced. Everyone except essential personnel transfers to our ship. We try to slip away while they're investigating the wreckage. What about the Harmony's Edge? Captain Fexare asked. We sacrifice it, Rodriguez said bluntly. Use it as a distraction while we escape. The plan was sound, but it meant abandoning everything we had worked for, all our research, all our equipment. The Harmony's Edge represented years of scientific effort, and losing it would be a devastating blow to our mission. But the alternative was death, so we began the evacuation process immediately. The human ship, the Defiant Dawn, was smaller than our research vessel but built to completely different specifications. Where our ship was designed for comfort and scientific capability, theirs was clearly built for survival. Every surface was armored, every system had backups, and every corridor could be sealed off in case of emergency. Combat vessel, Dr. Vexnan observed as we were shown to the cramped passenger compartments. Exploration vessel, Torres corrected. But built for exploring places where everything wants to kill you. As our crew transferred to the human ship, I noticed something interesting about how the humans worked. They moved with the same fluid coordination they had shown during combat, each one knowing instinctively what the others were doing. There was no confusion, no wasted motion, no unnecessary communication. They were like a single organism with multiple bodies, perfectly synchronized and utterly efficient. How do you do that? I asked Rodriguez as he helped secure the last of our essential personnel. Do what? Work together like that. Move like you're reading each other's minds. He paused, considering the question. Training, I guess. We've worked together for a long time, been through a lot of dangerous situations. After a while, you learn to anticipate what your partners are going to do. But it's more than that, I insisted. It's like you're connected somehow. Rodriguez smiled, and, for once it wasn't terrifying. Maybe we are. Humans form bonds when they fight together, when they depend on each other for survival. We call it trust, but it goes deeper than that. It becomes part of who you are. The concept was alien to most species I knew. We worked together out of duty or mutual benefit, but the kind of total interdependence the humans displayed was almost unknown in galactic civilization. Is that why you carry antimatter weapons? I asked. Because you trust each other enough to handle that kind of power? His smile faded. We carry those weapons because sometimes trust isn't enough. Sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and chaos is the willingness to use whatever force is necessary. The evacuation was nearly complete when the incoming creatures reached the debris field. Through the Defiant Dawn's enhanced sensors, we watched as they investigated the remains of the Leviathan, their massive forms circling the wreckage like vultures. They're agitated, Dr. Vexnan observed, studying their movement patterns. The electromagnetic readings suggest high emotional stress. They're grieving, Dr. Zefti realized suddenly. Or angry. Possibly both. The creature's behavior supported her theory. Their bioluminescent patterns were chaotic, flashing in sequences that spoke of distress and rage. One of them, larger than the others, approached the Harmony's Edge and began probing it with obvious hostile intent. They know we killed their friend, Torres observed. And they want revenge. Revenge? Captain Fexare looked confused. But that would require complex emotional reasoning, the ability to form attachments, to understand causality. Intelligence, Rodriguez finished. The kind that makes them dangerous in ways that simple predators aren't. The largest of the creatures suddenly turned away from our abandoned ship and looked directly at the defiant dawn, despite the fact that we were theoretically hidden among the asteroids. It sees us, Chen announced calmly. All hands, prepare for emergency departure. The human ship's engines came online with a power that I could feel in my bones. This wasn't the gentle acceleration of a research vessel, this was the brutal thrust of a ship designed to escape from anything that might be chasing it. But the creatures were fast, faster than anything that size had any right to be. As we accelerated away from the asteroid field, they followed, their massive forms somehow keeping pace with our ship despite the laws of physics that should have made such speed impossible. How are they doing that? Our navigator asked in amazement. Biological manipulation of spacetime, Chen replied, studying the sensor readings. They're actually bending space around themselves to achieve faster-than-light travel without technology. That's impossible, Dr. Vexnan protested. No biological organism could generate that kind of energy. You said the same thing about their neural networks, Torres pointed out. These things have had millions of years to evolve in deep space. They've developed capabilities we can barely comprehend. The creatures were gaining on us, their massive forms growing larger on the rear sensors. The largest one had taken the lead, and its bioluminescent patterns were clearly visible even at this distance. It's trying to communicate again, Dr. Zefti observed. Those patterns, they're different from before. More complex. What's it saying? Captain Thexra asked. Dr. Zefti worked frantically with her translation algorithms, trying to decode the alien language written in light across the creature's hide. I think, she said slowly, I think it's saying stop. Or surrender. Something along those lines. It wants us to give up, I realized. To let them capture us. For what purpose? Captain Thexra demanded. Rodriguez's expression was grim. Probably the same thing we'd want if someone killed our family members. Justice. Or revenge. From their perspective, there might not be much difference. The pursuing creatures were close enough now that we could see individual details of their anatomy. They were beautiful in their own alien way, covered in patterns that shifted and changed like living art. But, beneath that beauty was an obvious predatory design, built for hunting and killing in the vacuum of space. We can't outrun them, Chen announced. They're too fast, and our engines are already at maximum. Then, what do we do? Captain Thexra asked. The three humans exchanged another of their silent communications, and I saw something in their expressions that made my blood freeze. It was the look of people who had reached a decision they didn't want to make. We used the ship killer, Torres said quietly. No, Dr. Zefti protested immediately. You said yourself it would destroy everything in the system. Not if we use it correctly, Chen replied. One antimatter charge, properly placed and timed, could create a gravitational anomaly. A temporary black hole that would drag everything in the area into it. Including us, Rodriguez added matter-of-factly. Including us, Chen agreed. Unless we can get far enough away before it detonates. The plan was insane. They were proposing to create a miniature black hole in the middle of an asteroid field while being chased by creatures that could manipulate spacetime. The margin for error was essentially zero. There has to be another way, I said desperately. There is, Torres replied. We can surrender. Let them take us, and hope they kill us quickly instead of slowly. The choice was stark. Certain death now, or almost certain death later. Do it, Captain Thexra said quietly. Deploy the antimatter charge. Chen nodded and began working at her control console. Preparing antimatter device for deployment. Target solution locked. Detonation in 60 seconds after release. 60 seconds, Rodriguez repeated. To get far enough away to survive the gravitational effects of a collapsing star. Can we make it? I asked. Probably not, Torres admitted. But, we're going to try anyway. The antimatter device was launched from the Defiant Dawn's rear tube, a small cylinder that contained enough destructive power to sterilize a planet. It drifted toward the pursuing creatures, who seemed to regard it with curiosity rather than alarm. They don't recognize it as a weapon, Dr. Vexnan observed. Why would they? Chen replied. No sane species would carry something like this. The creatures slowed their pursuit, apparently intrigued by the strange object drifting toward them. The largest one extended a probing appendage, perhaps trying to determine what it was. 30 seconds to detonation, Chen announced. Our ship's engines screamed with the effort of maximum acceleration, pushing us away from the blast zone as fast as physically possible. But it wasn't going to be enough. The laws of physics were against us. 20 seconds. The creatures were still investigating the antimatter device, their bioluminescent patterns showing what might have been confusion or curiosity. 10 seconds. I closed my eyes and waited for death. 5 seconds. The universe exploded. The antimatter charge detonated with a fury that briefly outshone the nearest star. For an instant, a new sun was born in the Kepler void, consuming everything within 1,000 kilometers in pure energy. Then, the gravitational collapse began. The makeshift black hole formed exactly as Chun had predicted, dragging asteroids, debris, and the pursuing creatures into its inexorable pull. The Leviathans struggled against the impossible gravity, their ability to manipulate spacetime useless against the fundamental forces of the universe. One by one, they were pulled into the event horizon, their massive forms stretched and distorted by tidal forces before vanishing forever. Our ship barely escaped, riding the edge of the gravitational wave like a leaf in a hurricane. The hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle, and several systems failed completely, but we survived. When it was over, when the temporary black hole had evaporated and space had returned to its normal emptiness, we found ourselves alone among the stars. Status report, Chen called out as the crew began checking for damage. Hull integrity holding, came the reply. Engine damage minimal. All personnel accounted for. We had survived. Against impossible odds, using weapons that should never have existed, we had escaped from creatures that should have been far beyond our ability to defeat. But, as I looked around at the faces of my fellow crew members, I realized that none of us would ever be the same. We had seen what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits, and it had changed something fundamental in how we viewed the universe. The humans themselves seemed unaffected by what they had done. They went about their post-crisis procedures with the same calm efficiency they had shown throughout the encounter, as if creating black holes and destroying ancient creatures was just another day at the office. Will you file a report about this? Captain Fexare asked Chen as they reviewed the damage assessments. Of course, Chen replied. Navigation hazard eliminated. System cleared for future exploration. That's all? No mention of the creature's intelligence, or the weapons you used? Chen paused, considering. What would be the point? The creatures are dead. The threat is neutralized. Everything else is just details. As I listened to this exchange, I finally understood what made humans so terrifying. It wasn't their weapons, or their tactics, or even their willingness to use violence. It was their absolute pragmatism, their ability to reduce any situation to its most basic elements and act accordingly. They didn't see themselves as heroes or villains. They were simply survivors in a hostile universe, doing whatever was necessary to protect themselves and those under their care. And that, more than anything else, was what made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Standing next to humans, I had felt true fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what survival sometimes required, and fear of the creatures evolution had created to ensure that survival. In the dark between the stars, surrounded by the infinite dangers of deep space, I was very glad they were on our side.